Hi, my name is Ricardo, and in this video I'm going to talk about Principle 4 of the King 4 report. Now, this principle is focused on strategy and performance, and it reads, the governing body should appreciate that the organization's core purpose, its risk and opportunities, strategy, business model, performance, and sustainable development are all inseparable elements of the value creation process. But these are not the only elements that are referred to in the report. So if you read through the report, they also talk about other elements, for example, information in technology and also integrated reporting. And in essence, they are saying that these all form part of the value creation process. When King 4 talks about strategy within the foreword, it makes a couple of statements in relation to strategy. Firstly, it talks about this move away from the concept of siloed thinking and introducing integrated thinking. So in essence, when we deal with strategy, you have to deal with those elements that they've specifically listed and the other elements that are being touched upon in terms of the report. Also, there's a need for the boards to consider the way they think about strategy. So it's not only about what they're getting out in terms of business. Keep in mind that the legal definition for a for-profit company is the acquisition of gain for its shareholders. So when we talk about gain, in essence, what King 4 is saying, there's a broader value creation process. It's not only about shareholder value and the increase, in terms of shareholder value. Now, obviously, when we talk about non-profit organizations, that value creation process is different compared to, a for-profit entity. In terms of the forward, it also says that outcomes of the organization's products and services should also be taken into account, specifically how those products and services would impact on society in general and also on the environment. And so you may recall we've spoken about the corporate citizen and its impact of the citizen in terms of the planet and upon people. And then it's recommended that the full sequence of inputs to outcomes in terms of the organizational strategy should be an agenda item for the board to consider. So the following factors are quite critical in terms of considering strategy, and that is trust and confidence, and also if there's a lack of trust and confidence, it may threaten the organization's operational legitimacy or credibility, and then the end result would be the destruction of the value of the organization. So trust and confidence, a very central part of strategy and performance. Now, there are a couple of important definitions to look at when we deal with the issue of strategy and performance. The one in particular is about performance. Performance is defined as an organization's achievements relative to its strategic objectives and its outcomes in terms of the effects on the capitals. Now, there's a specific concept, and in terms of the 6 capitals that the King report refers to. I'm not going to go through that in detail, and it includes the organization's outcomes in terms of its effects on the triple context in which the organization operates. Performance is therefore the result, whether it's positive and negative, of the value creation process. Now, this is important because I'm speaking primarily to non-profit organizations in the sense that, you have to define your value creation process. And that's usually linked to what's contained in your founding document. You've got a unique objective, public benefit objective for the most part, and that is about the value creation process. However, what I take out of King 4, and I think is important for the organization, is that there should be an integrated approach. Now, usually that happens with organizations. For example, organizations would conduct a SWOT analysis that looks at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Those are all interrelated and important, because based upon that, the organization will look at the strategy, and its performance. But I think it's so important from a governance perspective that the organization is more attentive towards, integrated approach in thinking, and also how that will be reflected and reported on to its beneficiaries. And from that perspective, I think governance is so important. Now, there are a few recommendations made by the King report in terms of specific practices in this context when we talk about strategy and performances. And firstly, it provides that the board assumes the responsibility to set the direction for the organization and to steer the organization towards its ultimate objective. Secondly, the formulation of the strategy, whether it's long-term, short-term or medium-term, must be delegated to the staff. And then thirdly, the board must approve the strategy. Now, a few years ago, I was actually at a conference where Professor Mervyn King, who's the chairperson of the King Committee, where he spoke, and he made a statement which I thought was quite interesting. He said, the board must think, not do. Now, I think for the most part with non-profits, that is what the board should do. It should think. Unfortunately, you don't have the privilege of only thinking, you must also do. But the thinking part is so important. If you get caught up in the doing part, unfortunately, you're going to neglect the thinking part. And the strategy and performance, it's part of thinking for the organizations. And so that's essentially your role in terms of approving it. But this is also what King 4 recommends in terms of that approval process in engaging with the strategy and performance. They say that the board should challenge that strategy constructively in terms of its timelines, in terms of its risks and opportunities, and to what extent it depends on the resources and relationships. And that's so important, because when we talk about resources and relationships for non-profit organizations, that's critical. Also in terms of the stakeholders, consider what are the legitimate and reasonable needs and interests and expectations of your stakeholders. So the whole stakeholder engagement process and the interconnectivity of all of the above. And then also the board should provide that ongoing oversight and implementation. So clearly, when we talk about strategy and performance, although the board's role is approval and not necessarily the formulation of that, the board should engage actively and constructively, in terms of the organization's strategy, keeping in mind that the strategy should also be, subject to change, because we're dealing with a changing environment. So from that perspective, it should be fluid. So I hope this video is helpful. If you do find it helpful, please click on the like button, and also please share it with others that, if you think it would be helpful to others. Thank you for having watched this.